Yogi Roth, SiriusXM Pac-12 Network. Has coached quarterbacks, worked with quarterbacks on the LSU roster, and covered Jayden Daniels very closely. So let's go ahead and dive into it with him. Yogi, what's up, man? What's going on?
Good morning, brother. How you living?
Doing well. Nice to talk to you this morning. And we're talking Jayden Daniels, and let's start there. Just looking at his stats, right? I think what jumps out to people is the burst onto the scene freshman year, where he throws 17 touchdowns and just 2 picks, and then maybe cause people to scratch their head when they look at this last season, and that ratio becomes 10-10. You have covered this guy. How would you explain the disparity in those two numbers?
Yeah, well, I think anybody who watches the game and knows like numbers are one thing, and when you watch it and there's so many storylines within those numbers, you got to take them into consideration. But I get the question, especially off of the news of him presumptuously going to LSU. I think the biggest thing that he had to deal with was really youth and inexperience at wideout. That to me, if you look at him, like his first year as a reference, he went off. Brandon Ayuk is the first-round pick, plays for the Niners. Everybody knows him. And Jayden really, when he got in as a freshman, his job was to really manage that team and manage that role, and then become crunch time, deal. And that's really how Herm Edwards has developed that program in his NFL model, quote unquote, is to keep it close, like most NFL games are, and then in the end, put the ball in the hands of your best player and let him deal. And like they did that at Michigan State. We all remember that. I think his second game of his freshman season on a huge stage, and many times, including the Oregon game, they knocked them out of the CFP. I think it was week 10 of his freshman year. That second year, Corona really ravaged that team. I know there's a lot of off-the-field noise around Arizona State and coronavirus and recruiting, but when you look at like the virus itself, they never got into a rhythm, right? You go back and watch the USC game. That was the first Pac-12 game, I believe, at like 9 a.m. was the big noon kickoff on Fox. And it was awesome, and they're moving, and they're dealing, but just the young receivers at a ton of drops. And then from that point on, I don't think they had 2 consecutive weeks where they played. I mean, they had a moment where they had a stretch where they weren't even playing for about a month. So sophomore year was up and down, but he finished it strong, right? You go back and watch his final game as a sophomore against Oregon State, and he's dealing. And I remember talking to him coming off that game in their spring football. He's like, I'm finally confident in my wideouts. And that's where they were all last year getting into the season, right? I did their spring game. I did their opener. I did his last game against Arizona as a broadcaster. And you just thought that group would be better. You thought that as a collective they would elevate together. And there were times where it just didn't happen. Whether it was Jayden and his feet and his body and all the intangible elements of technique at quarterback, they just weren't necessarily in sync for a lot of reasons. Whether he was trying too hard, putting too much on himself, critical times, guys not making plays. But on the flip side, he also made some epic plays. You go back and watch UCLA last year. You could argue that's the best offensive half in all of Pac-12 football last year. The way that he played. So I'm excited for you guys to have him. I think the biggest thing that changed, to answer your question, was kind of what I referenced around the youth and experience, and also him, right? And at quarterback, sometimes your confidence can dip, and it's just me from the outside. But I think this guy's got all the tools to be a baller and a gamer and thrive in the environment down there. And it won't be easy because he's got a lot of talent he's got to compete with. But Jayden's got some unique traits, whether it's second reaction, getting away from a rush, using his legs, getting downfield. And technically, he's sound in the pocket. So I'm excited to see how he competes.
I want to talk about one of those traits. I mean, his rushing total went way up this year. His freshman year, he runs for 355. The next year, in only 4 games, he runs for over 200 yards, but 710 yards on the ground this year. Is that something just because maybe the offense changed, and that's why maybe the passing numbers go down, the rushing totals go up? Kind of what do you attribute the rushing totals going way up this year to with Jayden Daniels?
Well, he had a lot of big runs.
Yeah.
I think that skews it a little bit. But I think, too, they got a running back in Rashad White who, at least going into the draft out west, he's our best back, and he's in the conversation. Right? These guys all 6'2.5", 220, and Herm Edwards compared his rushing style, not who he is, but rushing style to that of Marcus Allen. Right? So tall but long, but also can be a thumper. So he demanded a lot of attention. And I think at some point when you looked at their offense and the struggles they had in the passing game, they had to implement, the tools and the weapons they had, which are Jayden in the zone read and the RPO game, where his legs can be a threat. And they just were. I mean, and when it was crunch time, comp to his freshman year. And even his freshman year, he used his legs a decent amount when he had to. Oh, they just leaned on it more. Calling a bunch of their games this year, his former OC, now Zach Hill, they always talked about just getting him going, right? And sometimes when your wideouts or the passing game is struggling, and that doesn't find you a rhythm, you got to get hit a couple times. You got to, have some positive plays. So I think it was more of a function of, they needed the offense to get moving. Offensively they struggled this year. You just look at them, and that's evidence to recognize the times. They're inconsistent, I think, throughout, but overall it's because he can do it. Right? This guy will be a threat with his legs, not every down, but enough to keep your backside defensive end home, or a linebacker you're going to have to spy him on third down. Like, there's things like that Jayden naturally is going to have to do, and he's probably better than the defender. Even going to the SEC, he's got some twitchiness to him. He's a long kid, man. I mean, you'll stand next to him and be like, damn, this is taller than I thought.
Yeah.
He's still skinny as all get out, but he's stronger than he's been when he got in, and I think he'll take another step this year.
And Yogi, when you think about like a Brian Kelly and a Mike Denbrock offense, right? And I think about maybe Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati, I guess Zaire back in the day, like Ian Book, they've always seemed to have skewed toward a more athletic type quarterback. Like, does he feel like maybe the best fit in this LSU quarterback room for their type of offense?
I don't know, man. I mean, you probably know that a little bit better, but I've talked to a lot of Notre Dame quarterbacks recently. I'm working on a book around the quarterback position. And the thing that I'm most intrigued by for Jayden is that he's been the dude since he showed up. Right? Like, he got to Arizona State as a true freshman mid-year, and they had two other freshmen at the time that were highly regarded quarterbacks out west. He beat them out pretty efficiently and became the starter. And he's been the guy, right? I mean, he's had the keys to that facility, per se, and that offense. And he would have been on his third OC this year if he ended up going back to Arizona State, but he was the guy, right? He was a captain. Now he walks in an environment where there's talent, right? I've been around all of those guys, Miles Brennan, Garrett Nussmeier, Walker Howard. I mean, it's a Shark Tank, and we all know there's not a lot of oxygen in a quarterback room. And there's not a lot of room to breathe. And here comes Jayden from the outside in, and I just think that, and I've seen this before, where West Coast kids or East Coast kids transfer out west or vice versa. Transferring out of your footprint looks good, but it's hard.
Yeah.
And you look at Jayden Daniels is a great example.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's at Georgia and came from the best program, arguably, in high school football, and he's not playing, right? And he's out again. So I think that's what I'm intrigued by, right? Does he fit athletically? Yes. I had a chance to meet up with Ian Book over at the Super Bowl. You look at I watched him play 7-on-7 with first graders, man. And I just watched him move around a little bit. And I was like, damn, he's way more athletic than I ever even realized. And Jayden got that twitchiness to him. So yeah, I think among that group, he's probably the best athlete. But it's going to be about his temperament. And I know Brian Kelly coaches that position hard. And it's going to be fun to see how it shakes out, because there's not a lot of snaps. I'll be curious to see how it's divvied up, week 2, 3 of spring ball, and see how it shakes out with a room of 4 players that I think can all play major college football.
Well, and you've just had a wild career, right? I mean, we have on your little crown here, whatever, Pac-12 Network and Sirius XM, but that doesn't even go into, quarterback coach under Pete Carroll back in the day. You've written books, produced documentaries. Like you said, you're working on a new quarterback book right now. What would be your message to the other quarterbacks in that room when suddenly Jayden Daniels shows up on the doorstep? How are you keeping, like you said, there's not a lot of oxygen there. How are you managing that room?
Yeah, I'd say pause. Then I'd tell parents, because the parents are probably freaking out too. Right? Oh my God, we got to go. And I mean, I've talked to so many families when this happens, right? There's one thing about the transfer, but there's one thing about the guys in the room when the transfer comes in. And I'd say just take a beat, take a breath, pause, man. And then I'd say, look, the number one trait outside of having, the ability to put a ball in spots for a quarterback is, do you have what it takes to love competition? Right? And now I'll get esoteric on you, but if you look at the word compete right now on your smartphone or wherever you are, compete is defined as to strive against, right? I'm going to beat you. Nussmeier's going to beat Walker Howard, whatever. Jayden will beat out all of them. But if you scroll down further, the Latin root of that word is to strive together. And this is something Coach Carroll talked about all the time in the quarterback room, because we would have 5-star after 5-star as well. And a big part of it is can you walk into a competitive environment and elevate everyone around you? Right? Not go take everybody down, but go elevate everybody around you. So a quarterback that operates like that, in my opinion, and says, you know what? Hey, Jayden, come in. I don't mind showing you how we read this route. I'm learning for the first time, too. This is my first spring in this offense. Let's talk about it. The guy that does that and competes along with the other guys and doesn't try to fight some dude, like, theoretically, or take somebody down or win the guy that doesn't allow any of that to take up brain space, I think will win the job. And I think we'll be able to handle the grueling season that LSU is about to embark upon and manage all the things that come with starting at that program, right? Because the instant comps are going to be, we all know what they are, right? It's Joe Burrow. Oh, you're going to come in, you're going to transfer, you're going to Heisman. I'm sure they pitched him that, and they should. But the reality is you got to come in and just worry about you and pause and see if you can deal. Because if you can, you'll win the job. And that's what Brian Kelly's proven everywhere. You go back and whether it's Malik Zaire and Deshaun Kaiser, I mean, there's a lot of instances where he's played a bunch of quarterbacks, right? Or had a lot of talent in the room. At the end of the day, whoever's executed the best is the guy who's won. That's it. So that's what I would tell those guys. And all three of those, Miles Brennan, I fell in love with in high school.
Yeah.
Garrett Nussmeier, I've known him since he was probably 7 years old. I've been around his dad for a long time. And Walker Howard impressed me the most because I think he's an absolute shark, man. Like, this dude is as competitive as guys I've seen in a while at the Elite 11 in the environment, and he rose up and met the moment. And Jayden as well. Like, people will see his demeanor, and he's quiet, he's a little shy, he's reserved, but go turn on the game. Right? This dude's a gamer. When I talk to whether you coached him or played with him, and I understand the video that went viral the day he entered the portal, and I think that's pretty classic for most locker rooms if a guy leaves at that stature. But overall, he's risen up and met huge competitive moments. Go watch Utah from 2019. I called the game. He gets smoked snap after snap. This is one of the best defenses statistically since the mid-1980s in college football. He didn't flinch. I think he went 3 of 17. It was freezing cold. He popped up every time after he got knocked down the ground because they couldn't protect all night. So this guy's got the tools and the traits to go win. I just think for that room, it's whatever guy doesn't worry about what the other three do is going to go win the job. And that is, we know, is not easy, but it'll be fun to try.
Just some spectacular insight from Yogi Roth, at Yogi Roth on Twitter. Go follow him, a true Renaissance man. Yogi, thank you so much, man.
Hey, anytime, brother. Looking forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Thanks, Yogi. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. All right. We went long there, but I think that's probably the best insight you're going to get into Jayden Daniels all day long. So definitely look for that to be up on YouTube later. Close that hour 2 now.